The pristine halls of the Celestian embassy on Earth gleamed under the artificial light, their crystalline surfaces refracting rainbows across Lieutenant James Foster's dress uniform. He stood at attention, trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite the wonder that filled him. After 3 years of diplomatic tensions between Earth and the advanced Celestian Empire, this reception was meant to be a turning point, a celebration of newfound cooperation between the two species. Queen Avalora of the Celestians had personally come to Earth, bringing with her an entourage that included her twin daughters, Princesses Celera and Vena. The Celestians were known throughout the galaxy for their mastery of light-based technology and their ethereal beauty, with skin that seemed to shimmer with starlight and hair that moved like aurora borealis. James wasn't supposed to be here. As a tactical officer aboard the EDF Hyperion, he should have been organizing security protocols from the command center. But Admiral Harrison had insisted on having his best officers present at the reception, even if they were more comfortable behind a tactical display than making small talk with dignitaries. The reception hall buzzed with conversation as human and Celestian officials mingled. James observed the room with a soldier's eye, noting exits, scanning for potential threats. Something felt off, but he couldn't place it. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts. Queen Avalora stood at the center of the gathering, her presence commanding attention. Her silvery hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of starlight, and her violet eyes held wisdom earned through centuries of rule. The Celestians' natural longevity was just one of many traits that had initially caused humanity to regard them with both awe and suspicion. The Queen's daughters stood nearby, each distinct despite their twin status. Princess Celera, the elder by minutes, carried herself with quiet dignity, her midnight blue hair arranged in intricate braids that symbolized her role as future queen. Princess Vena, more warrior than diplomat, wore her stellar white hair in a practical style, her bearing reminiscent of the royal guards who protected their family. James's attention snapped to a subtle movement in the shadows near the ceiling. The embassy's security systems should have detected any unauthorized presence, but something was wrong. He noticed a slight distortion in the air, similar to the effect of Shadowkin stealth technology. The Shadowkin Empire, bitter enemies of both Earth and Celestia, had opposed the alliance from the start. Without hesitation, James moved through the crowd, his eyes fixed on the distortion. As he drew closer to the royal family, he saw it, the telltale shimmer of an energy weapon powering up. Time seemed to slow as his training took over. "Down!" he shouted, launching himself toward Queen Avalora. The air crackled as an energy bolt passed through the space where she had been standing moments before. James tackled her to the ground, shielding her with his body as chaos erupted in the hall. 3 Shadowkin assassins materialized from their cloaked positions, their dark armor absorbing light. Royal Guards and Earth security forces responded immediately, but the assassins had chosen their positions well. They had a clear shot at the Queen and her daughters. James rolled to his feet, pushing Queen Avalora behind a pillar. He drew his sidearm, a standard-issue plasma pistol that seemed woefully inadequate against Shadowkin battle armor. But he had trained for situations like this, studying every scrap of intelligence on Shadowkin combat tactics. "Stay down, Your Majesty," he ordered, forgetting protocol in the heat of battle. To his surprise, the Queen nodded, her eyes alert and calculating rather than afraid. The Shadowkin moved with lethal grace, their energy weapons cutting through the air. James spotted Princess Vena pulling her sister to safety while drawing a weapon of her own, a Celestian light blade that hummed with power. She was a warrior, but she was also exposed. James made his decision in a split second. He fired 3 rapid shots at the nearest assassin, not aiming to penetrate their armor but to overload their stealth systems. The strategy worked, the assassin's cloaking field flickered and failed, making them visible to the Royal Guard's targeting systems. But the other 2 assassins had noted his position. Energy bolts sizzled past him as he dove for cover, returning fire. He caught movement in his peripheral vision. Princess Celera had begun weaving a complex pattern with her hands, light gathering around her fingers. Celestian battle magic, he realized, something few humans had ever witnessed. The air itself seemed to crystallize as Solara's spell took effect, trapping one of the assassins in a prison of solid light. Vena took advantage of the opening, her light blade finding a weak point in the trapped assassin's armor. James focused on the last assassin, who had managed to work their way behind the security perimeter. They were closing in on Queen Avalora's position, their weapon charged for a killing shot. Without thinking, James threw himself into their line of fire. The energy bolt caught him in the shoulder, searing through his uniform and flesh. The pain was immediate and intense, but he didn't let it stop him. He crashed into the assassin, disrupting their shot and grappling with them at close quarters where their ranged weapon would be less effective. The assassin was strong, enhanced by their armor, but James had trained in zero-gravity combat and knew how to use an opponent's strength against them. He locked his good arm around their weapon hand and twisted, forcing them off balance. The assassin's armor sparked as they struggled, their stealth systems failing completely. Princess Vena appeared beside them, her light blade humming. "Move," she commanded, and James rolled away. The blade flashed once, and the assassin went still. The battle had lasted less than 2 minutes. Security forces swarmed the hall, securing the area and tending to the wounded. James tried to stand but found his legs unsteady, his shoulder screaming in protest. Queen Avalora appeared at his side, her hands glowing with healing energy. "Be still, Lieutenant Foster," she said, her voice carrying authority and genuine concern. "You have done enough." The healing light spread through him, dulling the pain and beginning to repair the damage. James looked up to find both princesses watching him, Solara with thoughtful consideration, Vena with newfound respect. "You saved my life," Queen Avalora stated. "Without hesitation, without thought for your own safety. Such actions cannot go unrewarded." "I was just doing my duty, Your Majesty," James managed, though the words sounded insufficient even to his own ears. The Queen's violet eyes seemed to peer into his soul. "Perhaps. But in doing so, you have proven yourself worthy of something far greater than mere commendation." She glanced at her daughters, who nodded in silent agreement. "Lieutenant James Foster, when you have recovered, I would speak with you privately about your future. I believe the stars have brought us together for a purpose." As medical teams arrived and the chaos began to settle, James couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. The way the princesses looked at him, the Queen's cryptic words, something momentous was about to unfold. He just hoped he was ready for whatever came next. 3 days after the assassination attempt, James found himself aboard the Celestian royal vessel, Starlight Ascendant. His shoulder had healed remarkably thanks to Celestian medical technology, leaving only a faint silver scar as a reminder of the battle. The ship itself was a marvel of engineering, its corridors seeming to shift between solid matter and pure light. A royal attendant led him through the vessel's winding passages to a private garden chamber. Here, reality blurred even further, plants from a dozen worlds grew in harmonious arrangements, their leaves and petals catching the artificial sunlight in ways that defied Earth physics. Queen Avalora waited for him, along with her daughters. "Lieutenant Foster," the Queen greeted him warmly. "I trust you have recovered." "Yes, Your Majesty. Your healers work miracles." James stood at parade rest, uncertain of the proper protocol in this intimate setting. "Please, be at ease," Avalora gestured to a seat in the garden. "What I have to discuss with you requires comfort and openness." As James sat, he noticed how the princesses positioned themselves, Solara to her mother's right, Vena to the left, both watching him with intense curiosity. "Our people stand at a crossroads," Queen Avalora began. The Shadowkin attack was not merely an assassination attempt, it was a statement. They fear the alliance between Earth and Celestia, and with good reason. Together, we could reshape the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. James nodded, following the political implications. They hoped to destroy the alliance before it could be solidified. Precisely. Celera spoke for the first time, her voice musical yet precise. But they failed, thanks to you. In doing so, they inadvertently created an opportunity. An opportunity? James asked, glancing between the three royal women. Queen Avalora leaned forward slightly. Lieutenant Foster, what do you know of Celestian marriage customs? The question caught him off guard. Very little, Your Majesty. I know that bonds between Celestians are both emotional and energetic, forming actual links between their life forces. Indeed. The Queen smiled. We also practice multiple unions when circumstances and hearts align. My daughters, for instance, have always been expected to share a consort, one who could complement both their strengths and help them lead our people into the future. James's heart began to race as he realized where this conversation was heading. Venna, who had been silent until now, spoke up. You fought with both skill and honor. You showed tactical brilliance and physical courage. But more importantly, you demonstrated something rare, the ability to act decisively while still protecting others. What my sister means, Celera added, is that you possess qualities that would serve both of us, and our people, well. Lieutenant Foster, Queen Avalora's voice took on a formal tone, I offer you the hands of my daughters in marriage. Through this union, you would become not merely a consort but a true partner in leading both our peoples toward a shared future. James sat in stunned silence for a moment, his mind racing. Your Majesty, this is... I'm honored, but... You need time to consider, the Queen finished for him. Of course. This is no small matter. I suggest you spend the next few days getting to know my daughters. They will show you our ways, and you can show them yours. Over the following days, James found himself alternating between the company of each princess. Celera took him through the ship's libraries and research centers, explaining Celestian history and culture. Her intelligence was matched by a dry wit that emerged when she was comfortable, and James found himself fascinated by her perspective on the universe. Our people have always sought to understand the fundamental nature of light, she explained as they stood in a laboratory where scientists manipulated pure energy. We believe it is the basic building block of consciousness itself. Venna, by contrast, showed him their military facilities and training areas. She was direct, physical, and possessed a fierce joy in action that resonated with his own warrior spirit. During a sparring session, using training weapons that simulated their real counterparts, James found himself thoroughly outmatched but exhilarated. You adapt quickly, she commented, helping him up after a particularly challenging bout. Most humans take months to even begin understanding our combat styles. As the days passed, James discovered something unexpected, he was developing genuine feelings for both princesses, each in their own way. Celera's intellectual depth and hidden warmth drew him in, while Venna's passion and strength called to his own warrior's heart. They were different as day and night, yet complementary, like two sides of the same coin. The princesses, too, seemed to be warming to him. Celera began sharing personal stories rather than just historical facts, while Venna sought his opinion on tactical matters. They often spent evenings together, all three of them, discussing everything from battle strategies to philosophy. During one such evening, in a quiet observation lounge overlooking Earth, Celera asked the question that had been on all their minds. What troubles you about accepting our offer, James? He appreciated her directness. I worry about being worthy, he admitted. Not just of you both, but of the responsibility. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat or a ruler. Venna moved closer to him. You're more than just a soldier. We've seen it in how you think, how you act, how you care about consequences beyond the immediate tactical situation. And perhaps, Celera added softly, what our people need is someone who combines a warrior's courage with a protector's heart. Looking at them both, James felt something shift inside him. The impossible was beginning to seem possible, the future opening up with new possibilities. But before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Venna was instantly alert, moving to a nearby console. Multiple Shadowkin vessels dropping out of hyperspace, she reported, her voice tight. This isn't an assassination attempt, it's an invasion force. As James and the princesses rushed to the bridge, he realized that their courtship would have to wait. The real test of their compatibility would come in how they faced this threat together. The future of both their peoples might depend on it. The bridge of the Starlight Ascendant erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to their stations. Queen Avalora stood at the command center, her presence radiating calm authority despite the crisis. James found himself analyzing the tactical displays alongside Venna while Celera coordinated with the ship's defensive systems. 5 Shadowkin dreadnoughts, Venna reported, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. They're deploying fighter screens and boarding craft. This is a full-scale assault. James studied the enemy formation, his military training kicking in. They're not just attacking us, look at their positioning. They're creating a blockade between Earth and the Celestian fleet. Trying to isolate us from reinforcements, Celera concluded, her voice grim. Our shield harmonics are already adapting to their weapons, but they've brought enough firepower to overwhelm us through sheer volume of fire. Queen Avalora's voice cut through the tension. Lieutenant Foster, I would value your tactical assessment. James straightened, aware that this was as much a test as it was a request for help. The Shadowkin expect us to either retreat to Earth or try to break through to the Celestian fleet. But their formation has a weakness. They're focused on blocking large-scale movement, not small ships. Venna's eyes lit up with understanding. The royal shuttles. They're shielded and armed, but small enough to slip through their screen. Exactly. If we launch a coordinated attack from multiple vectors, we could disrupt their formation enough to dash. James was cut off as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Shields at 80%, a bridge officer reported. Enemy boarding craft approaching. Queen Avalora made her decision. Implement Lieutenant Foster's strategy. Venna, take command of our fighter squadron. Celera, coordinate our defensive matrix. Lieutenant James, I need you to protect this bridge. Show us that your tactical brilliance extends beyond theory. The next hours were a blur of combat and quick decisions. James organized the bridge's defense forces, working seamlessly with Celestian security teams. He found that his Earth combat training complemented their light-based weapons and tactics in unexpected ways. Through it all, he kept one eye on the tactical displays, watching as Venna led her fighters in a series of brilliant attack runs. Her sister's defensive strategies proved equally impressive. Celera's understanding of Celestian technology allowed her to redirect shield power with uncanny precision, protecting the ship's vital areas while maintaining their offensive capabilities. The first wave of Shadowkin boarders reached the ship, their dark armor absorbing the light in the corridors. James had positioned his defenders strategically, using the Celestians' natural ability to manipulate light to create killing zones and ambush points. They're pushing toward the engine core, Celera reported, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air as she maintained the ship's defenses. If they disable our main power, we'll be helpless. Not if I can help it, James replied, already moving. Keep the bridge secure. I'm going to lead a counterattack. He reached the engineering section just as a team of Shadowkin breached the outer defenses. What followed was close-quarters combat at its most intense, light blades clashing with shadow steel, energy weapons illuminating the darkened corridors in brief, violent flashes. James found himself fighting alongside Celestian engineers who doubled as warriors, their movements synchronized with an almost supernatural precision. He adapted his tactics on the fly, using their light-based abilities to create opportunities for his more direct fighting style. Through their neural links to the ship's systems, he could hear Celera coordinating the overall defense while Venna's fighter squadrons continued to harass the enemy fleet. The three of them had fallen into an instinctive rhythm, each complementing the other's strengths. A particularly vicious firefight erupted in the main engineering bay. James took a glancing hit from a shadow blade, the dark energy sending cold shivers through his body. But he pressed on, remembering his training with Vena and applying it in real combat. James. Solara's voice came through his comm unit. The enemy flagship is changing position. They're trying to bring their main guns to bear on our reactor section. Not going to happen, Vena's voice cut in, fierce and determined. Squadron, form on me. We're going to give them something else to think about. James watched on a nearby display as Vena led her fighters in an impossibly tight attack run, threading through the enemy formation to strike at their flagship's sensor arrays. The maneuver was insanely risky, but it forced the enemy to divide their attention. Taking advantage of the distraction, James led his security team in a final push, driving the boarders back from the engine core. The battle became a dance of light and shadow, with Celestian warriors wielding their light blades alongside his more conventional combat techniques. As the last Shadowkin fell, James felt a surge of pride, not just in their victory, but in how naturally he had worked with the Celestian crews. They had accepted his leadership without question, just as he had trusted their abilities. Engineering secured, he reported, allowing himself to catch his breath. How are we doing overall? The enemy fleet is falling back, Queen Avalora's voice held a note of satisfaction. Your strategy proved sound, James. Vena's fighters have scattered their formation, and Solara's defense networks held firm. Return to the bridge, we have much to discuss. As he made his way back through the ship, James reflected on how the battle had changed things. He had seen firsthand how well he worked with both princesses, how their different strengths created something greater than the sum of their parts. More importantly, he had felt the deep trust and connection that had formed between them. The decision he had been struggling with suddenly seemed clearer. The Shadowkin attack had shown him something important, not just about his compatibility with Celestian ways, but about his place in their future. He quickened his pace, eager to reach the bridge and the two women who had become so important to him. But as he approached the command center, a new alert sounded. The battle, it seemed, was not yet over. The Shadowkin had one more card to play, and it would test their newfound bond to its very limits. The new alert that echoed through the Starlight Ascendance corridors was different from the previous battle signals, deeper, more urgent. James burst onto the bridge to find Queen Avalora and her daughters staring at a holographic display with grave expressions. They've deployed a void engine, Solara explained, her usual composed demeanor shaken. A weapon that creates artificial black holes. James felt his blood run cold. He'd heard rumors of such weapons, but most believed them to be theoretical. Where did they get that technology? The Shadowkin have been stealing research from both our peoples, Queen Avalora said, her voice tight with concern. Now they mean to use it against us all. The tactical display showed the massive device emerging from the largest Shadowkin vessel. It resembled a dark sphere surrounded by rotating rings, each thrumming with ominous energy. If they activate that weapon between Earth and our fleet, Vena said, it will create a permanent void barrier. Earth would be cut off from all interstellar travel and communication. They mean to isolate humanity permanently. James studied the display intently, his tactical mind racing. There's more to it than that. Look at the gravitational projections. If they create a void point here, it won't just isolate Earth. The gravitational distortions will tear apart both our fleets. Solara's fingers danced over the control panels, running calculations. He's right. We have less than 30 minutes before they can power up the device fully. Once it's active, there's nothing we can do to stop it. Queen Avalora turned to James, her eyes intense. You've proven yourself in battle and strategy, James Foster. What do you suggest? James took a deep breath, considering their options. We need to hit them from 3 directions simultaneously. Their fleet is focused on protecting the void engine, they expect a direct assault. So we give them something else entirely. He moved to the tactical display, outlining his plan. Vena, your fighters are the fastest we have. You'll lead a strike force here, at their rear guard. Make them think we're trying to break through to the Celestian fleet. Venna nodded, already calculating attack vectors. A feint to draw their defensive screen out of position. Exactly. Meanwhile, Salera, I need you to coordinate with our engineering teams. The void engine works by concentrating gravitational forces. Can we use the ship's light manipulation systems to disrupt those forces? Salara's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, we could create a cascading resonance pattern. It won't stop the device, but it could delay its activation. Good. That gives us time for the real attack. James highlighted a specific point in the enemy formation. I'll lead a small team in a stealth shuttle. While they're distracted by Venna's attack and dealing with Salara's interference, we'll slip through their screen and board the command ship directly. A bold plan, Queen Avalora observed. But extremely dangerous. The Shadowkin will fight to protect their weapon. They will, James agreed. But they won't expect us to bring the fight to them. And I've learned a few things about combining Earth tactics with Celestian abilities. The Queen studied him for a long moment before nodding. Very well. Choose your team and prepare for launch. But James. She stepped closer, her voice lowering. Remember that you carry more than just the hopes of our peoples with you now. My daughters have grown quite fond of you, as have I. James met her gaze steadily. I understand, Your Majesty. I won't let any of you down. The next 20 minutes were a whirlwind of preparation. James selected a mix of Earth and Celestian warriors for his strike team, choosing those who had fought well together during the boarding action. As he made his final preparations in the shuttle bay, both princesses approached him. This is reckless, Salera said, but there was no rebuke in her tone. Instead, she pressed a small crystal into his hand. A focusing crystal from our temples. It will help you channel our light-based defenses more effectively. Venna stepped forward next, her warrior's demeanor softened by emotion. Try not to die. I still need to teach you proper light blade techniques. She hesitated, then pulled him into a fierce embrace. Come back to us. James held them both for a moment, feeling the strength of their connection. I will. We've only just started to explore what we could be together. I'm not letting the Shadowkin take that away from us. The mission launched with precise timing. Venna's fighters streaked across space in a dazzling display of tactical brilliance, drawing enemy ships away from their defensive positions. Simultaneously, Salara's modifications to their systems began disrupting the void engine's power buildup, buying precious minutes. James's shuttle slipped through the chaos, its advanced stealth system supplemented by Celestian light-bending technology. They approached the massive Shadowkin command ship, using the larger vessel's own shadow to mask their approach. Remember, James briefed his team one final time, we're not here to fight their whole army. Get me to the engine control room, and I'll handle the rest. The boarding action was swift and violent. James led his team through the dark corridors of the Shadowkin vessel, their mixed tactics proving devastatingly effective. Earth Marines provided covering fire while Celestian warriors used their light manipulation to create barriers and illusions, confusing the enemy. But the Shadowkin fought with desperate intensity, knowing what was at stake. James took a serious hit protecting one of his team members, the enemy weapon burning through his armor. The focusing crystal Salera had given him pulsed with energy, creating a barrier that prevented worse damage. They fought their way to the engine control center, but the resistance was immense. James knew they were running out of time, he could feel the ship vibrating as the void engine powered up. New plan, he announced to his team. Hold this position. I'm going in alone. Before anyone could object, he charged through the final barrier, letting the momentum carry him into the heart of enemy territory. What he found there would change everything, but that was a battle yet to come. The engine control center of the Shadowkin vessel was a cathedral of darkness, with towering columns of black metal stretching up into shadows. At its heart, the void engine's control matrix pulsed with malevolent energy. But it wasn't the technology that made James freeze in his tracks, it was who he found waiting for him. Supreme Commander Morix of the Shadowkin stood before the controls, his armor more elaborate than any James had seen before. Unlike his soldiers, Morix didn't hide his face behind a mask. His features were sharp, almost crystalline, marked with lines of dark energy that pulsed in rhythm with the engine behind him. The human who would be Prince, Morix's voice held a note of genuine curiosity. Do you understand what you're interrupting here? This isn't just about Earth or Celestia. This is about maintaining the natural order. By isolating humanity? By destroying two civilizations? James kept his weapon ready but didn't fire. Something told him this confrontation would require more than just combat. By preventing an abomination, Morix gestured to the engine controls. Humans and Celestians were never meant to unite. Your species is too young, too aggressive. They are ancient, powerful. The mixing of your peoples will destroy the balance we've maintained for millennia. Through his neural link to the Starlight Ascendant, James could hear Solara's voice. The engine is reaching critical power levels. Whatever you're going to do, James, do it now. But Morix wasn't finished. I've studied you, Lieutenant Foster. Your tactics, your adaptability, impressive. But do you truly believe you can bridge the gap between your worlds? That you can be worthy of not one, but two Celestian princesses? That's what this is really about, isn't it? James began moving slowly around the chamber's perimeter. You're not afraid of humans and Celestians cooperating. You're afraid of us truly understanding each other. Of love crossing the boundaries you've tried so hard to maintain. Vena's voice came through next. James, my fighters can't hold them back much longer. The fleet is regrouping. Morix's expression darkened. Love? You think this is about love? This is about power. About maintaining the separations that keep our galaxy in balance. The Shadowkin have guided this balance for eons, culling connections that would upset the natural order. No, James said firmly, understanding flowing through him. This is about fear. Fear of change, of growth, of possibilities you can't control. I've seen what humans and Celestians can accomplish together. I've felt the connection between myself and the princesses. It's not an abomination, it's evolution. Enough. Morix's calm facade cracked. Dark energy crackled around him as he drew his shadow blade. If you won't see reason, then you'll see oblivion. The battle that followed was like nothing James had experienced before. Morix was a master of shadow combat, his movements almost impossible to track in the darkness. But James had learned from both Vena's warrior training and Solara's lessons about light manipulation. He used the focusing crystal they'd given him, not just as a defense but as a weapon. Each clash between his light-enhanced weapons and Morix's shadow blade sent sparks of conflicting energy across the chamber. They were evenly matched, Morix's experience against James's adaptability. The void point is forming. Solara's voice held barely controlled panic. James, the engine. But he couldn't reach the controls, not with Morix pressing his attack. Each time James tried to move toward the engine, the Shadowkin commander cut him off. Time was running out. Then he remembered something Solara had said during one of their discussions: light and darkness aren't opposites, they're parts of the same spectrum. Understanding one helps you master the other. In that moment, James stopped trying to fight the darkness. Instead, he embraced it, letting it flow around him just as he'd learned to work with Celestian light. The change in tactics caught Morix off guard. Impossible, the Shadowkin commander breathed. You can't manipulate shadow energy. I'm not, James replied, continuing his fluid movement. I'm accepting it, just like I've accepted that change isn't always a threat. Sometimes it's salvation. The moment of distraction was all he needed. James drove forward, using a combination of Earth combat techniques and what he'd learned from both princesses. His strike wasn't aimed to kill, instead, he severed the energy lines running through Morix's armor, disrupting his connection to the shadow powers he relied upon. The Shadowkin commander fell, his armor darkening to dull metal. James raced to the engine controls, but they were locked down. "Celera. I need your help. Can you see what I'm seeing through the neural link?" Yes, her voice was strained with concentration. "The encryption is complex, but if we work together." Like we did during the boarding action, James remembered. He placed his hands on the control panel, letting Celera guide his movements through their connection. At the same time, Vena's voice came through, reporting that her fighters were moving to protect their position. Together, they did what neither human nor Celestian could have done alone. James's understanding of tactical systems combined with Celera's knowledge of energy manipulation, while Vena's forces kept the enemy fleet at bay. The Void engine's power began to fade, its artificial singularity collapsing in on itself. "No," Morix whispered from where he lay defeated. "You don't understand what you've done. The balance. We'll find a new form," James finished. "That's what balance does, it adapts. Just like we all must." The aftermath of the battle brought changes no one had expected. The Shadowkin fleet, their ultimate weapon neutralized and their commander captured, retreated to the edges of known space. But more importantly, the cooperation between humans and Celestians reached new levels. Standing once again in the garden chamber aboard the Starlight Ascendant, James faced Queen Avalora and her daughters. This time, there was no hesitation in his heart. "I accept your offer," he said simply. "Not just because of politics or alliances, but because what I feel for both of you is real. Together, we can show everyone that love doesn't weaken us or upset the balance, it makes us stronger." Celera and Vena moved to stand beside him, their hands joining his. The Queen smiled, recognizing not just a political union but a true melding of hearts and minds. "Then let it be known," Queen Avalora proclaimed, "that this union marks not an ending, but a beginning. A new age where boundaries become bridges, where differences become strengths." As the light of distant stars shone through the garden's crystal walls, James stood with his future wives, knowing that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. They had proved that love could transcend not just culture or species, but the very forces that shaped the galaxy. The balance hadn't been destroyed, it had evolved, just as they all had. And in that evolution lay the hope for all their people's future.